It is noon. Yes, it's afternoon. I'm Brandy B. Harris with WBRZ in the Press Club today. We are joined by Senator Cleo Fields. He is a third-term state senator, and he's actually running for the newly created congressional district. He's the chairman of the Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee. He's obviously on the Louisiana Legislative Caucus. We've seen him representing with that organization, and his current term runs through 2028. Now, we all here are media and press people, so we've been following very closely all of the happenings at the state legislature, coming out of the special session focusing on crime, to the current regular legislative session, to, of course, that upcoming congressional campaign. So without further ado, Senator Cleo Fields.
Well, first of all, thanks, Brandy, for that introduction. I enjoy watching Brandy on TV every single morning, Monday through Friday. And now that I get a chance to see in person is even more remarkable. Listen, I am happy to be here. Brandy asked me to talk about a couple of things, and I want to get those things out of the way first. The crime session. The crime session was an interesting session, to say the least. The governor wanted to do, brought about some initiatives to deal with the crime problem we have in our state. Several measures passed. In fact, all of the ones that he was involved in actually passed. I'm just going to go through just a few of them real briefly. First was the constitutional carry, which allows a person to, if they legally own a handgun, they could actually carry it. And I voted against that bill because there's no training. There's no training, and I just personally believe that, you know, when you allow people to carry weapons, they should have some type of training. The next one was a carjacking bill by Representative Siegel. That bill increased the penalties for carjacking in the state. And then there was a DUI bill that was by Senator Edmonds. I kind of started calling him Senator. I voted for that one because it requires an interlock device for first offense DWI. So I didn't see a real problem with voting for that bill, so I supported the senator and passed it SB 7. Next, you know, raising age. That was a tough one. We raised the lowered the age rather for juvenile offenders. I mean, you know, we have to do something to really deal with this crime problem we have in this state. It's a major problem, and you know, I'm of the opinion we have to deal with it in a more holistic fashion versus just, you know, raising the age, lowering the age for juvenile offenders. Juvenile offenders cost us a lot in this state. I think, you know, all of the folk who commit crimes in this state cost us a lot of money. In my view, we spend more money on the back end, and we spend less money on the front end. And if we change that, maybe we have a better result. The next one, the last one I want to talk about was we included another way you can commit a person to death, you know, by basically use a knife to kill. And I voted against that because personally I'm not in favor of the death penalty. And so I voted against that bill. But those are the hot button issues that we passed this past crime session. Next, she requested that I talk about the overview of this session. First, I want to talk about some of my initiatives this session. You know, one, I'm trying to improve the quality of life of student athletes. You know, we all go to sport events and we cheer and we clap for athletes when they do well. And then when they don't do so well, then sometimes we get so caught up into the moment. Many times we boo them, or we, say things to them that they shouldn't, that we shouldn't. And we don't really know the effects that they have on a student athlete. And so I think we need to look at it real seriously. So I've introduced legislation to provide for mental health counselors in high school and in college. I think that's a necessity. I think it's needed. Many colleges across the state already have mental health colleges for their student athletes. You know, one thing I would like to commend LSU about, LSU had it for every single subject, I mean every single sport, which is a very good thing. I just think that we do not put enough emphasis on our mental health, the mental health of our student athletes, and this bill will simply do that. Next, I'm doing a bill that provides for, you know, this may sound somewhat draconian because we should have it already, but the air conditioning of all school buses. You know, our schools, our kids have to go to school, and it's a mandate that they do. And in Louisiana, it's just, it's not practical. It's not, you know, it's not human-like to put a kid on a very, very hot school bus in the morning, even in the morning, but certainly not in the afternoon, and have them travel to and from school. So I know that the local governments are going to say, well, we want a local mandate. So, you know, it's going to be prospective, which means that any school district that purchases school buses from this point forward, those buses must be properly air conditioned. Lastly, I want to talk about the initiative of voter protection. This is going to be an interesting bill. It's going to come through Senate and Governmental Affairs. That bill is going to, right now, when you register, you have to put your mother's maiden name on the voter registration. We had attempted to change that because there's really no need for that, and I just think it kind of hampers a person's individual right to vote. All right, now let's talk about, the other thing. Now, this is not one of my proposals, but I know I'll probably get some questions about it. The governor is proposing to do a constitutional convention or reform. First of all, I do think that there's absolutely, positively too much in our Constitution, and you know, if there's a way to get a lot of these things out of the Constitution, we should try to do it. The problem is, you know, once we open the Constitution up, it's open, and so, you know, my recommendation to the Senate President is that we get a consensus before we go into this convention, so that we won't waste a lot of time. Right now, the thought is the convention will take place with both House and Senate members. That would be, you know, 39 members of the House, 105 members of the, 39 members of the Senate and 105 members of the House. But there's some debate about that because the members of my body, the Senate, feels that they would be in the minority when it comes to a constitutional convention. So those things are being worked out now in terms of how we would actually have a constitutional convention. So that's all I have for the overview of this session of the legislature. Now the other thing, Brandy, the last thing she wanted me to talk about, and that is congressional and Supreme Court redistricting. Let me first take Supreme Court redistricting. Right now in Louisiana, we have 7 members of the Supreme Court. There's one African-American district that's based in New Orleans. The bill that I've proposed this session of the legislature, I proposed it last session, I supported a bill similar to it last session of the legislature. It would basically increase that number from 1 to 2. Right now, the districts are now proportioned. The Constitution doesn't require that you have one man, one vote for judges, but they are so out of whack. We have not redistricted the Supreme Court in over 100 years, and it's time to do it. And so this year, I basically introduced a bill that failed last session of the legislature, and in committee, I actually put the Jefferson Parish District into the Blackman Parish District, and we passed all 3 bills out of committee. I have a bill, Senator Presley has a bill, and Senator Miller has a bill. All 3 bills are now on the floor. We plan to debate those bills. We won't be debating those bills this week, but we definitely will debate those bills next week. And the bills, all three bills create a second minority district. Now, the civil rights community have filed a lawsuit against the state and has been litigating this for several years, and now it's time to end this litigation. There is a violation. I think the courts are going to rule that there is a violation. So at the end of the day, the Attorney General, the Governor, and obviously the civil rights groups have all agreed to try to settle this matter by coming through the Louisiana legislature. And so any of these bills will do that, and we're going to hear that debate next week. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is congressional redistricting. Congressional redistricting, as you know, has been a very tedious process, but I want to talk about how we got here to begin with. Every 10 years, as most of you know, everyone who's in the press definitely knows, we have to do something called census. And we take those census and then we determine how many members of our community are minority, majority, Hispanic, so forth and so on. And Louisiana has always had a sizable African American population. And let me just go back in time. You know, one of the things I'm very proud about in Louisiana is, most people don't know it, but Louisiana was the first state in the whole United States of America to elect a person of color to the U.S. Congress. John Willis Menard was elected in 1868, and he was the first African American to go to the U.S. Congress. The bad thing about it was when he went to Congress to take his seat, a gentleman from Ohio by the name of James Garfield, who became the 20th President of the United States of America, stood in the well and said it wasn't time for a Negro to be seated in the U.S. Congress. And so they voted to send him back to Louisiana, and he never took his seat. And that was during the Reconstruction, and then we elected a gentleman by the name of Charles Nash. He was from Opelousas area, and he was the first African American elected and actually served in the U.S. Congress. But since Reconstruction, we've only had four blacks ever elected to the U.S. Congress. First person elected to the U.S. Congress, because after Nash, Louisiana went 114 years without a single African American representing this state. But in 1990, William Jefferson was the first African American elected to Congress, and he was from the 2nd Congressional District in New Orleans. And then in 1992, the people of Louisiana, you know, Lord Almighty blessed me, and I was elected to Congress. And then after that, Cedric Richmond was elected to Congress from the 2nd Congressional District, and then Troy Carter. So we've only had 4 African Americans to represent the state of Louisiana in the U.S. Congress since Reconstruction. Now, so how do we devise this district that's going to be litigated in the courts next month? Listen, it was tough, but we had a good, tough problem. It was a good, tough problem to have. You know, plaintiffs have filed a lawsuit against this district because they said it was based solely on race. You know, that race was the predominant factor in the production of this second majority minority district. Well, I can tell you from personal experience, I was there, I lived it, race was not the predominant factor. We're very fortunate in this state. You know, in this state we have, I never dreamed that Louisiana would have such power in the U.S. Congress. You know, in this state, you know, we have the Speaker of the House. I mean, the Speaker of the House is from North Louisiana, and I'm very proud of the fact that Louisiana has accomplished so much in so little time. And most big states like California, New York, they've never had, as best that I can recall, a Speaker of the House and a Majority Leader. Steve Scalise, who is from South Louisiana, That is a great accomplishment. Give us a hand, because that is a great accomplishment. The gentleman who brought the bill, I mean, Senator Womack, he realized that he could not touch the Speaker of the House because that would be unwise. And no one will help him do that, you know. And then you did not want to touch the majority leader either. And then he had a personal issue, you know. His own senator is the only female member of the U.S. Congress from Louisiana, Julia Letlow. And so he had 3 issues he had to deal with. The bill that I introduced in previous years, you know, went from Baton Rouge and went up the river on up to Monroe. And that's the district that I've always advocated for. But when the state lost in the district court, not 1, not 2, but 3 times, and then when they lost in the 5th Circuit, and then when the Supreme Court sent the signal to not only Louisiana but Alabama, y'all gonna have to draw a second majority black district. It's in violation of the the Voting Rights Act. And so at the end of the day, we ended up with the plan that we have today, not because of racial reasons. Race was not the predominant factor, but it was politics. Members were protecting their politics, and the courts will have a hearing on this bill, I think it's the 6th and the 7th, or the 7th and the 8th of next month, and then they will ultimately decide if this district that we have is legal. Now, if the courts decide that it is legal, then everything goes on like it is. If they decide that it's not legal, then the courts can very well draw the districts, and the courts have already heard from, you know, the 5th Circuit, and they've heard from the Supreme Court. So the likelihood of them not drawing a second minority district is not all that great, or they can give it back to the legislature. So those are the legislature that have failed time and time again. So I really don't think that the court will send it back to the legislature, but that's just me pontificating. So with that said, I think Randy, have I answered, have I addressed all of your issues?
I think so.
All right, so.
17 minutes, so right on time.
Good, so now I open up the floor. And listen, let me just show you this. Since I'm 17 minutes, she told me 20. I brought copies of the 2 maps because I've been hearing a lot of folks saying this district looks terrible, you know. Well, it's, you know, we judge districts based on a compaction test. And that's a legal term that they use in court. You know, how many whole parishes do you have in the respective district? How compact is it? The communities of interest. And the present congressional district today, you know, we debated that district a couple of years ago, or a year ago. And quite frankly, this is the present congressional plan that we have today. And the big issue, or the big debate, is about the 6th congressional district. The 6th congressional district, you know, if you want to give it an eyeball test, it looks like a horseshoe. But that's the way we produced it. And I had a plan that had all of the districts much more compact. But they had 2 majority-minority districts, and the second minority-majority district went up to Monroe. And then this is the way the district looks today. It looks like a seatbelt. I read that Sunday in the paper. But quite frankly, this district is more compact. It splits less parishes than the present plan, or the previous plan that we had in the state. But all of those are issues for the court to decide, and they are going to decide that next month, and then we will get guidance from the court once they rule. So I'm sure I'm at the 20-minute mark, so I'll now stop and take any questions that you may have. Yes, sir, Chris.
Senator, Congressman Garrett Graves said on one of our shows last week that he believes the governor, that his district specifically was targeted because of his endorsement for Stephen Waguespack for governor. I just want to get your reaction to that claim.
Well, I mean, look, I feel Congressman Graves. Look, there's not another person in Louisiana who has gone through redistricting, who had a seat in Congress and had it taken away. Not another person, so I understand his pain. And I'm gonna get to your question, but I really want folk to know I understand what Garrett Graves is going through today, because I went through it 27 years ago. And it was at that time I went and met with my mentor, Colin Powell, I'll never forget. And I said, Colin, they took the district. And Colin said, go back home and make a living. And the rest is history. But listen, did politics play a role? Absolutely. The legislature had to decide whose district they were going to make a majority black district. We only have 6. And they chose Garrett Graves. I mean, I didn't choose it. The Senate and the House chose it. And at the end of the day, that's the way it ended up. Questions? Yes, sir.
Would you expect to, given that we don't know what the map is going to look like once the work gets done, would you expect to run for Congress for a majority-minority district, regardless of where it is and how it's laid out?
I would think, I would think that's a fair assessment. Because, listen, my district was changed, or the district that I represented was changed twice when I was in Congress. The 4 years I served in Congress, the district ran from Shreveport to Monroe to Baton Rouge. They call it the Zorro district. That was not by choice. Actually, when I produced the plan, I wanted it to go to Monroe and call it a day, because you had a large enough black population to create a second majority black district by just going to Monroe. But the politics pushed it all the way to Shreveport. And I was chairman of the committee at the time. And there was, legislators in Shreveport, he said, if we're going to create a majority black district, I want it to come in my area as well. And then there were others who said, well, if you're going to create it, don't send it in my area. So that was the politics of it. And I fought not to send it to Shreveport, but they sent it to Shreveport. And then there was a member of the legislature who wanted to run for Congress. Everybody has a right to run. Nobody should be discouraged or told or whatever. And a dear friend of mine, Senator Charles Jones, he had an interest in running for Congress. And he wanted as much of that district to go into North Louisiana as possible. And it was a tug of war. I was trying to comply with the Voting Rights Act, and others were like, no, we need it here. So at the end of the day, it went there. But I've had the luxury of representing those people in Shreveport. Never thought this day would come. So I've represented people in Shreveport. That's why I'm excited about this district. But guess what? If it goes to Monroe and it excludes Shreveport, it doesn't do me any harm. Look, that's the original plan I had to begin with. I would love it. I don't care. I've represented the people of Monroe. I don't think you can create the second district without including one or the other. And both I've represented before, and both I'd be willing to represent again. Any other questions? Yes, May?
So, you mentioned earlier about changes to the Constitution, potential changes to the Constitution. I know that that's been a big rumor, lots of talk about it. You also mentioned that once you open it up, you've opened it up. Can you elaborate on what the concern with that would be?
Well, here's the tug of war we're having now. And I apologize but the tug of war we're having now is some of the people, some of the legislators, some of the individuals who wish to open up the Constitution, we spend a lot of money on the MFP, for example. I support the MFP. I'm a former chair of education. I just think that's the future. I think if you want to do something with the crime problem, you got to educate our kids young. I support early childhood education because I think that reduced crime, I think that's a good start. I support, you know, I passed the bill for first grade being mandatory. So at the end of the day, you got that side. You got the folk who saying, well, we can open it because we do have too much in the Constitution, quite frankly. And we are all to blame for that. We as legislators are to blame, and we as the people are to blame because we keep sending you know, things to vote on. And so at the end of the day, that's one side. Then there's another side who says, we gotta deal with this MFP. We should take it out of the Constitution. So there's a tug of war. And until those issues are solved in terms of, you know, what are we going to deal with? It's, you know, the worst thing we can do is have a constitutional convention and do nothing. And I don't think the people would be happy about that. So I think both the President and the Speaker of the House are working with their memberships to see, you know, what could happen, you know, despite what Cleo feels as an individual. Can I get, you know, the majority votes, 2/3 vote, with or without Cleo, or with or without this person, or with or without that person? Because if we can't do that, then we're going to be wasting time. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for coming, Senator Phil. I have actually a big concern, but I also have a question. You mentioned about the lawsuit. I understand that there is a push for to abolish the only minority representation on the Louisiana Medical Board, and there's been a lawsuit filed to, you know, to eliminate that one minority representation on the Louisiana Medical Board. You know, how do you feel about that, and what's going on with that?
Well, I apologize. I should know more about the issue, but let me tell you how I feel. If what you're saying is correct, I'm against it. I mean, we shouldn't.
Yeah, because I want to get the rest out. My concern is that, you know, minority doctors or black and brown doctors here in the state of Louisiana is already marginalized. There has been, you know, it's just all over the news, an attack against, you know, black and brown doctors here in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah.
So now we got this problem where they're trying to abolish our only representation on the Louisiana Medical Board that is a minority. So what's going on?
Listen, if that's, look, I believe you, and if that being the case, I will fight with every ounce of my strength to maintain minority representation, not only on a medical board, but on any and every board. Listen, let me just tell you, we as a state, you know, we really need to get beyond race. I mean, we really do. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, I just think that's holding us back, you know, and in order for us to go forward, you know, we have to, you know, put those things behind. A baby crying at night for milk, you know, is not black or white. That baby's hungry, and we ought to feed it. Man walking down the streets with a pink slip in his hand at 5 o'clock is not black or white. He's unemployed, and he needs a job, you know. So I hear what you're saying. I'm not aware of it, but I will look to see, and I will support maintaining minorities on any and every board. Yes, sir.
Senator Fields, in 2022, after you served on the Ronald Green Senate Committee, you openly questioned the need for a Louisiana State Police Commission and even sponsored a bill to abolish that commission, but the subsequent fate of that bill was that it was, quote, permanently removed from the files of the Senate, unquote. So can you elaborate as to what caused you to back away from that initiative?
Yes. First of all, you know, the state police is the highest law enforcement agency of our state. And I guess all of us know what was taking place with the state police at that time. State police, I'll talk loud. State police at that time had gone through a rigorous investigation, not only by local bodies, but by the federal government. And I really didn't see the need for the state police to be in the Constitution. That goes back to why we need to open it up, and then why we don't need to open it up. Things like that I would support, because the state police decided, because they had so much power and so much influence in the state, they wanted to have their own civil service. So they wanted to be protected. They wanted to be in the Constitution. Why I withdrew it from the files of the Senate, I don't know if I did or not. But if I did, I take your word for it.
That's what it says on the legislature's
Yeah,
website.
but look, that's a piece of legislation that I would bring again.
Okay.
You know? Our state police has to be credible, and at that time. But listen, we have grown, and we have gotten better, and I feel pretty confident that the state police of the past is not the state police of the future. Chris, you had another question? All right.
With Governor Landry's help, you were appointed to chair the Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee, and he was also supportive of the legislation to create the congressional district that you have declared to run for. Are you too close to this Republican governor?
You know, I was on a Jim Easter show, at the end of the show, I think somebody asked me a question. You know, that's a problem that we have, not only in this state, but we have it in this country, in Washington even more. People don't talk to each other. If you're a Republican, leave me alone, stay away from me, get away from me. Because if I'm gonna be honest, I went to Congress, because I never go to Congress, and I went to Congress about 4 years ago. Don't hold me to it, because he will research it. I think it was about 4 years ago. And I wanted to meet with a gentleman who I started with. I won't call his name. And I wanted to have dinner with him. And I called him, and he said, well, we might not want to do that because my colleagues are senior. And I said, man, what are you talking about? And he said, well, you know, let's just do it somewhere else because, you know, it's crazy up here. That's the problem we have with our federal government, and the problem we are starting to have with our state government. People need to talk to each other. If you don't talk to each other, you never get nothing. You know, and as I said Friday, I mean, I want to have a relationship with every governor, and I have up to this point. And I plan to always have a relationship with the governor. And if I'm blessed to go to Congress, I plan to have a relationship with the president. You know, I mean, we got to stop dividing, you know, when I first walked into Congress, I took my seat and I took a seat on the Republican side. And Speaker Foley said the housekeeper, whatever they call house doorkeeper, and said, tell Senator Congressman Fields he's on the wrong side of the aisle. You know, now, but that was true. In Washington, it is divided. Republicans on one side, Democrats on the other side. But that moment, he called me up and he said, I want you to preside over the House of Representatives, because he wanted to, you know, he wanted to go and do something else, and I was the only one that was sitting there, so he sent me up there. But at the end of the day, yes, I do have a relationship with Governor Landry. And I want to continue to have a relationship with Governor Landry, and I want to continue to have a relationship with the President of the Senate. You know, and they're both Republicans. But, you know, look at the recent legislation, his crime package. You know, just because you have a relationship with somebody doesn't mean that you follow everything they do. But I'm strong enough to say to Governor Landry, no, cannot be for it. And I just hope that as a state, that we don't get like they are in Washington. We have to work together. Governor Landry will be the first to tell you, the first person we got to get, and we probably won't, is Julio. Because I'm strong enough to tell him no. But when he's right, I'm the first one to vote for him. Yes?
So to follow up on Tyler's question, so as one of the most, maybe the most influential Democrat kind of in the legislature right now, do you have a special responsibility to deliver for, or at least try to deliver and represent Democrat constituencies and Democrat targets? And how does that manifest?
Yeah, I have a responsibility to deliver, yes, for everybody, but, you know, Democrats, yes. Look, I'm not naive, just naive, so naive that I don't think that a lot of Democrats, you know, view me as a person in the legislature who's been there for a minute, who has some stature. Yes, I have to deliver, but at the end of the day, what is delivering? You know, I can't deliver nothing if I can't get 20 votes in the Senate and 50-some votes in the House. I'm just another member. And see, in Washington, that was good because that was okay with me. I was a little kid, I was a freshman, and 2 years I was in the majority, and 2 years I was in the minority. And for the 2 years I was in the majority, it was fun. But the 2 years I was in the minority, I had to work. You had to work to even amend the bill. Your name would never get on the bill, but you had to do that inside work. You had to work. And look, what I want to be is effective. I want to be effective for the people that I represent. I wouldn't have been able to get Donna Shalala to name the Pendleton Research, name Pendleton the National Health Institute, you know, had I not been able to work hard and be effective. And a lot of other things. Yes, ma'am.
You know, I appreciate you mentioning that because there is a movement that's happening right now, and I would like to know how much you know about it, that our votes are no longer free. People are just fed up with the fact that, you know, you just vote Republican or you vote Democrat or, you know, and you take these sides. But there is a movement right now, and it's calling to vote uncommitted in the primary presidential elections. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am. And see, that's one of the issues we have. People are getting so fed up with both parties until they just saying, I'm going to be an independent.
That's right.
And as a Democrat, I don't want people to leave the Democratic Party. You know, I try to encourage people to stay in the party, try to get people to begin to come to the party, because that's my basic principle. But you mentioned Governor Landry. Nobody mentioned Governor Edwards. I mean, they just expect me to have had a great relationship with Governor Edwards. I had a great relationship with Governor Edwards. You know? But because I have a relationship with Governor Landry because he's a Republican, is a good question. And I don't think any of my colleagues question, my commitment in the legislature. But we really need to start working a little bit more together to start crossing that partisan line. Right, Ed, doing all right?
I think so. That's why I was looking over and see.
Yes, ma'am.
Take a couple more questions.
Do you agree with the method that's proposed for the Constitutional Convention for the selection of the delegates?
We haven't, unless they may have and I don't know about it, but we haven't, at the best I know, we have not made a final decision on how the delegates are going to be selected. The most recent discussions have been, the House and the Senate, and then the governor gets some appointments. But here again, just telling you, members of the Senate do not feel comfortable with going into a convention where House members and senators would be the conventionees, how did I say that? And at the end of the day, a senator's vote would be less than a House member's vote. And that's not the way the people intended it. So we try to work all of that out. Those are some details that we're trying to work out. But the latest is have the Senate, the House, and then have the governor to appoint some, and then the question then was, well, where do we meet? you know, with such a big convention. They're still trying to work out all those details. The president of the Senate would be in a better position to speak to that issue, and the Speaker of the House, the two of them would be in a better position to speak to those two issues. Yes, ma'am, we take this young lady.
I wanted to ask you about the corrupt justice that's going on in, you know, like Livingston Parish, in Livingston, and St. Tammany. They holding an innocent man dying of cancer. They already outdated his squad. I mean, he's eligible for a squad. He's got cancer. They're allowing inmates, young inmates that's not even sick, to go home with a bracelet and telling them stay away from their victims. And then they're allowing the people with cancer that's dying, they're waiting for this turn, waiting for this man to die, knowing that he's an innocent person. And when they went to trial, he asked the jury, and they did a trial on this man and asked the jury to not go by the evidence, because the evidence proved that the person was not assaulted. So he asked the jury to have a trial of emotion, and that's what they did. So how do we go about getting lawyers, judges, that's really allowing them to
One lecture a question is, how do we go about getting lawyers to represent people in the justice system? One way is the Innocence Project. I don't know if you're familiar with the Innocence Project, but they work very hard. The people who don't have the wherewithal to get good lawyers, who don't have the wherewithal to compete in the criminal justice system, if they feel that there is some opportunity that you've been convicted wrongfully, they work very hard to help those individuals. I understand. Look, I am one of the gentlemen who represented, but the Innocence Project did a great job. A gentleman out of Houma who had served 30-some years in prison, and he was wrongfully convicted. That's why I can't give it a death penalty. But listen, I understand what you're saying. He was wrongfully convicted, and then I teamed up with the Innocence Project, and they ended up getting him released. And Clyde Charles, I think was his name. But that was a good example of people being wrongfully convicted and didn't have the wherewithal to defend themselves. So listen, thank you all so very much. I appreciate you having me.